I love to tell the story, more wonderful it seems than all the golden fancies of all our golden dreams. I love to tell the story, it did so much for me, and that is just the reason I tell it now to thee. I love to tell the story, 'twill be my theme in glory, to tell the old story of Jesus and his love.
When a person buys a vehicle, what are the kinds of things that they think about before they buy the car?
Car payments.
Car payments. Now look at the size of the monthly payment in this ad, because that's the most important thing in the minds of most people who buy vehicles. Not of everybody. They are marketers, and they know what they're doing when they create an ad like this. And most of these ads are like this, where it is a dollar amount in big, bold print, almost as big as the vehicle itself. There's a lot of fine print too, isn't there? How many months, how many miles, what's the payment you have to make up front? Is there a payment going out the other end? Is it closed in, open end, lease? Is it a lease or is it a purchase? Even when you're looking at the financial aspects of it, it's a whole lot more than that one number. But in most people's minds, when they're looking at this and making their decision, they're thinking, how much is this going to cost me every month? That's what they're asking. And so this is what they put in here. But if you want to know the cost, you have to dig a whole lot deeper, don't you? You have to dig a whole lot deeper than just that one number, understanding the price. What's the cost? And we're going to talk about discipleship. And so there is a cost associated with discipleship, and we're going to talk about that. When somebody comes to Christ, do they count the cost? Do they think about, what am I doing here? Or are they thinking about what is being done for me here? What are they thinking? Well, that's kind of what we're going to be talking about a little bit today. But the vehicle gives us an example of how people think. We think in a very shallow way. We don't get into things in great depth. A few questions to begin. Why is it that a Hindu can and will walk by anybody who may be suffering and feel no qualms at all about walking on by and ignoring them? Because a Hindu is not going to stop and help somebody. When you think about Hindus and things that they believe,
Preserving out your destiny for this go-around.
all right, reincarnation is a big part of that, isn't it? And when we are suffering, that's just, we're paying the price for something that we've done in this life or in some prior life. And so therefore, if a Hindu sees you suffering in some way, well, you deserve it. It's just what you deserve. And if I were to help you and make things easier for you, then I'm getting in the way of your karma. So a Hindu who is a true Hindu, a true believer in Hinduism, feels absolutely no obligation. In fact, it's an obligation not to help somebody who is in need. Now, what about a Muslim? Why would a Muslim die or wire up their own child with a bomb to die in order to kill some other people? What's the basic thing behind this? I mean, why do they do it?
Well, it's that radical commitment to it.
Yes, that's what their prophet has told them to do.
It's their only assurance of salvation. Anything else is hit or miss.
This is promised. It is a promise of going to heaven if you sacrifice your life for jihad. So you kill these certain people, and we're certain people. Jews are the certain people. The Hindus are certain people. People who don't believe what they believe are people who need to be given the opportunity to switch over, but if they don't do that, then they deserve to die. See, that's the basic faith, the basic teaching of Islam. There are many people who say that they are Muslims who don't believe that. Just like there are many people who say that they are Christians who don't believe that Jesus was born of a virgin, or that Jesus was resurrected, or that many other things. They don't believe those things, and yet they'll say that they are Christian. There are many people who will say that they are Muslims, culturally and other ways, but they don't believe all the fundamental things. But if somebody believes the fundamental teachings of Islam, then they believe that it is a good thing to give your life to kill certain other people. What you believe is important, isn't it? What about the Christian? Why would a Christian die to save another person?
Well,
We're told, isn't it? We're to love one another, even to the point of sacrificing our own life for somebody else. He has provided the model, has he not? Giving his life for us. And that's true love, isn't it? To sacrifice life for somebody. Why have so many churches become entertainment arcades? Now, and I'm not saying that everyone that doesn't worship the way that we worship is an entertainment arcade. I'm not saying that. But there are some churches that are really very, very close to being entertainment arcades. I mean, it's all about the show. Why is that?
It's entertainment all around us.
there's money to be made.
I think they want to increase their audience, more people in the...
It's marketing, isn't it? They see a large group of people who are enticed by that. People who want to be entertained. We're in a culture that loves to be entertained, aren't we? And so people like that, and if we can provide that, then we'll be able to draw people in to whatever it is. And so some people say, well, this is good for the church. And so you have all kinds of show, if there is a lot of show, but through it all, the fundamental message of Christ is presented. That's one thing. But if it's all about the show, and it's all about just getting people as members, whatever that means, on the roll, then that's something quite different, isn't it? Because if we're only interested in getting people on the rolls to build the auditorium and make the show even bigger and flashier, then that's not what it's all about. That's not what Christ taught. There are many styles of worship, aren't there? Because we have many different personalities. We're all different. So there are some people who are most comfortable in a very formal church setting. They're most comfortable worshiping God in that setting. And there are other people who are not bothered at all by a more open and entertaining kind of worship, but can worship just as thoroughly and completely in that environment as the person does over here. But there are also people who go into the formal worship service and aren't really worshiping at all. There are nominal Christians in a formal service, just as there are nominal Christians in any service. And in the very entertaining kind of environment, there are nominal Christians and there are radical Christians, people who truly believe the fundamentals of the faith. But it's something that in our culture is very appealing to a large number of people. And so it can be something to further the gospel. On the other hand, it can be something that can get in the way of presenting the gospel. When we think about the culture today, we think of the culture today versus the culture of years ago, however many years back you want to go. We see what we would call deterioration. We see things have gone kind of downhill. And one of the things that we think we might see is that people seem to be less committed to things in general. There's more of a non-committal attitude toward everything. People just don't want to commit to anything. That may or may not be true. Is there any evidence that we might point to show that maybe the culture is becoming less committed to things, just having a more non-committal attitude? Anything that you can think of that might point toward that? Family. Take marriage, for example. How many families do we have in the United States today that are living together but are not married and probably don't really have any plans to get married in the near future, and maybe ever? It's not the commitment, right? Anything else you might think of that might point toward non-commitment? The chart here, I didn't label the chart, so you don't know what it means, but that kind of looks like things are going downhill in some way. You know what that is? That's the percentage of the United States population that is a member of a mainline church. Then in the 60s, amazing 60s, things started going downhill and it continued to go downhill year after year after year after year. And now it's half that, half of what it was. People not making that commitment anymore. Maybe we can extrapolate that to a commitment to what they really believe. Maybe they don't believe anything. It doesn't matter whether it's Catholic or Presbyterian or Muslim or Hindu or whatever. You have the nominal believers, those who say that they are believers. They say that they are Hindus, they are Catholics, they are Presbyterians, they are whatever. But they don't believe the fundamentals of that faith. They just don't believe it. And then you have a much, much smaller group of people that I call radical believers, and I'm going to kind of hit on that term a little bit today. I call radical believers because they truly believe the fundamentals of that faith. They believe the teachings of the faith. And that's a small percentage. And I don't care whether you're talking about Muslim, or you're talking about Catholic, or you're talking about Protestant, or Presbyterian, or anything else. It is a small group. The point I'm making here is there is in general in this culture this lack of commitment, and that's what the entertaining churches offer as well, isn't it? You see, if I have a body of worshipers, and I'll call them that, because there will be some worshipers in there, but a lot of people are coming for the entertainment, I can go there without a commitment, can't I? Who knows I'm there or I'm not there? You come here or you don't come here, we know whether you're here or not. People know whether or not you're here. Now, if it's a body of 5,000, sorry, it doesn't quite work that way. But that's what some people want. Some people don't want to be noticed. They don't want to commit to that. They want to feel comfortable worshiping, whatever that means to them, but not having to make a real commitment to anybody or anything. Because of my own background, I probably have been less critical of that kind of worship service because I know that there are people there who, as they start to hear and as they start to learn, they start to grow, will outgrow whatever that is and get closer and closer and actually become the radical believer, even though they may not be that radical believer at the beginning. So I think that a lot can be accomplished in that environment, but it can also lull to sleep some of those who really feel comfortable and say, well, this is all there is. And we're going to talk about that just a little bit more. One last question. Why do some people object to any suggestion that a Christian must do something?
Because they think that it makes salvation by works.
We are saved by faith and faith alone. Because of that, there's this suspicion on the part of some that as soon as you mention Christian has to do something, then you're saying, they have to do it to be saved. And that's not what you're necessarily saying. When we talk about do something, to do something might be something as simple as even love your enemies. Now, that's a command to us, isn't it? To love our enemies. Why might people have a reason for wanting to push that aside and say, wait a minute, you're becoming a Pharisee and you're becoming legalistic if you start preaching this stuff? Because it shouldn't be that, because we're just saved by faith. That's all you need is faith. Everything else, don't worry about it. Loving your enemy is a hard thing, isn't it? We don't do it particularly well. And so if that command is constantly thrown at us, then we start to feel guilty. And we don't want to feel guilty. I have a clip for you this morning. And I've used this film before, but not these scenes. To End All Wars. This is a movie about World War II, where some Allied soldiers, a couple Scottish and some mostly Australian, were caught by the Japanese and were required to build a railroad through the jungle in Burma. And a book was written by Ernest Gordon. This is the character playing Ernest. Wrote a book, Miracle over the River Kwai, which became a movie, Bridge over the River Kwai, which was then redone, this film, To End All Wars. And the book was republished with this title to match up with it. But you can read it in the book or you can see the film. The film is rated R because it has some violence. And in fact, the second scene that I have for you does have some violence in it, but it makes the point, so I'm going to leave it in. There are two scenes I'm going to show. It's going to involve these three characters, Ernie and Dusty and Major Campbell. They're in a prison camp. They've been there for a long time building this railroad. Most of the people in the camp died doing the work on the railroad. These men have survived. Ernie, at the request of the people around him, is probably the most intelligent person there, so he's been requested to form a school where they can kind of come together and talk about things. And in the first scene I'm going to show you, they're discussing Plato's Republic. Now, Plato's Republic, you need to keep this in mind as you see this discussion, was written 350 years before Jesus, a long time before Jesus. They're going to be discussing the just man, justice, revenge, which you would expect to be a topic of some concern for prisoners of war. And you're going to find that Major Campbell has a disagreement with Dusty and Ernie. Major Campbell is for revenge. The second scene is going to be where Major Campbell and a few of his colleagues have been captured after killing a guard and escaping. And the Japanese have captured them and brought them back in. And then when we pick up the scene, the other captives, the other prisoners that were captured have been killed. They've already shot them. And they're preparing to kill Major Campbell, behead him. So that's where we're going to pick up this last scene.
In the second book of the Republic, Plato says, "What will happen to the just man should he enter this world? Well, the just man will be scourged, racked, chained, and after every kind of misery, he will be crucified on a pole for all to see."
My question, if the just man is treated as you say, then what's the just response? Roll over and let evil have its wicked way?
What would you recommend, Major?
I'd recommend defiance. Justice for the captors, an eye for an eye.
At what price mercy?
Mercy. The last bastion of traitors and cowards.
So you would take a man and crucify him on a pole for all to see?
I would seek justice.
Attention, prisoners! These men are guilty of murdering 2 guards who represent the Imperial Army and of conspiracy to commit insurrection. They have violated the mercy of the Emperor and his benevolent subjects. Such bad spirits must be punished. Honorable Sergeant Ito will now dispense with the prescribed and just punishment.
Right. Hey!
Ito.
Dusty! 代わりにこの男を連れてけ！墓場前だ！はい！言うた。
Bastation. Do it.
Uçkume. Uçkume!
What Dusty knew was that if Major Campbell died at that moment, Major Campbell would go to hell, because Major Campbell was not a believer at that time. But if Dusty died, he knew that his destination was not hell, but heaven. And Dusty was willing to sacrifice his life that Major Campbell might have a chance to reconsider where he was. Could you do that? Our lesson is a teaching of Jesus. It's just a few verses in Matthew chapter 16, where Jesus is teaching his disciples about discipleship and the basic principle of what it means to be a disciple. So we're going to look at this in the context of this story. And it's about radical faith. It is about believing so completely, as Dusty believed so completely, that you're willing to sacrifice your life for what you believe. Well, let me back up. First of all, just before this, in chapter 16, Jesus is talking with the disciples, and he says to them, "Who do people say that I am?" And we remember that. And, they give all kinds of explanations to who he is. And Jesus asked the very big question, "Who do you say that I am?" And that's the big question. And Peter answered for everybody in saying that you are the Christ, you are the Son of the living God. So the disciples at this time have been with Jesus for several years, and they've come to this understanding now. He is the Christ. He is the Messiah. He is the Son of the living God. So they know who he is. That's the situation. So he's walking along with his disciples, and he makes this statement that the Son of Man must go to Jerusalem. Well, that has to disturb them immediately, because the people in Jerusalem are trying to kill him. And they know that going to Jerusalem is dangerous. And so he's telling his disciples that I must go to Jerusalem. Not only that, but he's going to go to Jerusalem, and there he is going to suffer many things at the hands of the scribes and the elders, chief priests, the Sanhedrin, all those people. He's going to suffer at their hand. So he is going to go to Jerusalem where they don't want him to go, and he's going to undergo something they don't want him to undergo. But Jesus is committed to doing what God has called him to do. And he is our model. We are to be committed to do what he's called us to do, no matter how unpleasant those circumstances may become. He's going to suffer many things and then be killed. Now, wait a minute. We just have come to this full understanding. He is the Messiah, the Son of the living God. And the Son of the living God is going to be killed by a bunch of men in Jerusalem? That doesn't make any sense. He adds this last part, and on the third day he will rise again. And even though they're going to hear these words again and again, when they get to the situation where he is killed, he's put on the cross, they don't remember this, do they? They don't remember it. So here's the situation. Well, Peter, of course, is going to react. God has said something, Jesus has said, God has said something that they don't want to believe. So Peter says, no way. He rebukes Jesus. No way. This is not going to happen to you. We're the same way. There are all kinds of things in there that are hard, and we don't particularly like reading those things. It's like when you're really angry at somebody and you're told to forgive them. How can I get out of this? How can I wriggle out of that requirement? We're doing what Peter did. We don't think that way. When we're doing it, we're thinking we're just being logical here. But in fact, we're just as rebellious as Peter in attempting to rebuke God. God, you're wrong. Can't mean that. How does Jesus respond to Peter? Get behind me, Satan. Satan. Because you're doing Satan's work. Satan would like to keep Jesus from going through with what he is committed to do. That would be perfect in Satan's eyes if he could stop this. Well, Peter, on his behalf, is trying to stop him. And Jesus says, you're just like Satan in this situation. Well, are we being like Satan when we are also rebelling against God and saying, wait a minute, God, you're wrong here. You must have this all wrong. I have a better idea. Is he saying to us then, get behind me, Satan? And this means a lot to me. I don't know if it means anything to you particularly. For you are setting your mind not on the things of God, but on the things of men. That pretty well describes it. For me, when I'm getting into this kind of trouble, that's exactly what's happening. My mindset, my focus, my attention is on the things of men, myself, not on the things of God. And so Jesus rebukes Peter in saying, your focus is wrong, your attention is wrong, your mindset is wrong. Paul beautifully in several places talks about your mindset, having your mind fixed on the right things. And it's on the flesh or on the spirit. We're either guided by the flesh or by the spirit. Unfortunately, we tend to be guided by the flesh too often, as Peter was here. Get behind me, Satan. You're not setting your mind on the things of God, but on the things of man. Then he adds, if anyone would come after me, he must deny himself. Oh, we're getting to the heart of the matter right here. You want to know what discipleship is all about? If anyone is going to follow Jesus, and that's what a disciple is, right? A disciple is that follower of Jesus. If you're going to follow Jesus, then you must deny yourself. Seems like we're going a step beyond faith here, aren't we? I mean, faith for salvation, but once we're saved, what is expected of us? Are we going to be his followers? Or are we just going to be nominal Christians? Say, well, I signed a pledge once, I did this once, I'm good. All I wanted was to be kept out of hell. They told me signing that card would make me stay out of hell, so I'm done. Don't need any more. Certainly I don't want this. Deny myself? I'm pretty proud of myself, so I don't want to deny myself. But if anyone would come after me, he must deny himself. Unfortunately, it doesn't stop there. There are two more parts to this. One, deny yourself. Two, take up your cross. Just as he took up his cross, that burden, whatever burden, trouble that God may bring into your path, take it on. Don't run from it. Take it on. Take up your cross and follow me. See, sometimes I think some people want to, well, I'll pick it up, but I'll take it in a more gentle direction. I'm going to get rid of it as fast as I can, and if I follow where Jesus wants me to go, I'll have to bear it for too long, and I don't want that, so I'll go this way. Deny yourself, take up your cross, and follow me. Follow me. Go where he wants you to go. Do what he wants you to do. Just as Jesus himself went where God wanted him to go, to Jerusalem, to do what God wanted him to do, in spite of the circumstances, in spite of the consequences. And that's what we are to do here. So here is radical faith. This is radical faith. This is being what Christ has called you to be. Denying yourself, take up your cross and follow him. A nominal Christian, somebody who put their name on the roll, hasn't been to church in 3 years, don't need to go, don't need any of that, haven't read the Bible in 5 years. Hey, I'm fine. I'm a member over here. I think my name's still on the roll. I'm good. No, that's a nominal Christian. Somebody who's claiming the name, radical believer. This is a radical believer. There's nothing superficial about this belief. This is belief to the core of who you are. Then, speaking to what Peter had just said, for whoever would save his life, and that's what Peter was suggesting, wasn't it? Jesus say, don't go there, they'll kill you. You don't want to be killed. We don't want you to be killed. Don't go there. Save your life. Jesus says to save your life is to lose it. That if you're going to do those, when that Muslim asks you, what do you believe? Do you think that Jesus is God? And has you kneeling down with a sword over your head, you can deny him and live. But you'll pay a terrible price. Whoever would save his life will lose it. If you're going to save your life by denying him, you're going to lose your life eternally. And that's a pretty heavy price to pay. But whoever loses it for my sake will find it. John 3:16, we all know, but we forget the verses that follow. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, and whoever believes in him should not perish but have everlasting life. For God did not send him into this world to condemn the world, but that the world might be saved through him. Whoever does not believe is already condemned. The person who does not believe is already condemned. Whoever would save his life will lose it. Whoever loses it for my sake will find it. What is the profit of man if he gains the whole world and loses his soul? I mean, you can have everything and then get to the end and say, whoops, wait a minute, I forgot something more important. I'll give you everything that I have for that. Well, that won't buy it. What shall a man give in return for his soul? Yourself. All the material things of the world, nothing. Mean nothing. If we could see things today the way that they will be seen at the end, how much value would we assign to all this? It's nothing. It is nothing. That deep relationship with him is what matters. That's what counts. At the end of Matthew, in chapter 28, you have the Great Commission. I want to come back to that because that kind of brings it back. Jesus has been crucified. He has been resurrected. And he is about ready to ascend into heaven. And he's meeting with his disciples. He's called his disciples to meet him on a mountain near Galilee. And his disciples come to him. The 11 disciples went to Galilee to the mountain where Jesus directed them to go. And what does he say to them? Go therefore and make disciples in all the world. That's the Great Commission, right? For all of us. Because he's going to say it's for to the end of the age, so it's for all. Go and make disciples. What are these disciples? He's going to say it clearly again, what it means to be a disciple, that follower of him. Go make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. We remember that part. But then the part that I want to focus on, teaching them. Making a disciple of somebody is more than just getting them to understand what Christ has done for them, but it's to get them to some deeper understanding so they can have a deeper relationship with him. Teaching them to observe, to do all that I have commanded you. These disciples, these new believers, need to understand all that Jesus has commanded us to do. To observe all. Not the things that we're comfortable with and excluding the others, and not adding a few other things that we think Jesus forgot. So we don't add to and we don't take from, but what he has taught us to do. We are to do, and we're to teach disciples to do that. So we're to teach these new disciples and remind old disciples that we are to observe all that Jesus has commanded. That's radical faith. You have divine providence and human responsibility. Both things are important. Divine providence, God has provided our salvation, hasn't he? And he provides for us in all kinds of ways. But he has provided for our salvation. We are saved by grace through faith. By God's grace, he's given us this gift of salvation. But our responsibility, that human responsibility, what is that? It is to deny ourselves, take up our cross, and to follow him. That's our responsibility. Doesn't save us, but because he has done this work for us, we want to do that. So that's radical faith, striving to live that life that God has called us to do. Radical. Because in the eyes of the world, it's extreme. Well, it is extreme. It is radical. As we begin to understand what he truly did for us, once we come to grips with that, what he did for us, then out of this gratitude for what he has done, then our faith becomes radical. You're not going to have radical faith. You're not going to deny yourself. You're not going to take up a cross. You're not going to follow him if you don't understand what he did for you. As you start to understand better and better what he has done, how far he has gone for you, then your faith starts to become more radical, deeper relationship with him.
I love to tell the story 'Twill be my theme in glory to tell the old story of Jesus and his love.